Self-compassion is the tendency to mindfully and unconditionally treat yourself kindly. And while it's not super surprising that this tendency is correlated with lower depression, higher ability to deal with stress, and lower anxiety, it is a little more surprising that it's actually positively correlated with motivation. When a lot of people hear about unconditional acceptance or kindness for yourself, they wonder what makes people motivated to keep improving. If I accept myself as I am, then how can I motivate myself to be a better communicator or a better father or a better person in general? And I'd like to talk about the answer to that question, because a ton of psychologists have actually already looked at this question, and they find that pretty reliably, self-compassion actually correlates positively with motivation, meaning the more self-compassionate you are, the higher chance you have of actually being motivated to do the things you want to do. There have actually been 26 studies on this topic with a grand total of over 7,500 participants. 21 of those studies found a positive relationship and 5 were inconclusive. And when you combine the studies, you can actually very confidently conclude that the relationship is positive and it's relatively strong. The way that people measure self-compassion has actually been very well validated, and a lot of this research is correlational, but even the ones that are experimental still find very reliable positive results. And that means that not only can we assume that there is a correlation where self-compassionate people tend to be more motivated, but you can assume that self-compassion is actually a major factor that leads to that motivation. Because when people are experimentally induced to have higher self-compassion, their motivation actually does increase. But it still seems really counterintuitive and makes you wonder where motivation comes from exactly. And for me, it really helps to differentiate between self-acceptance and pride. And there are a few different ways people go about trying to achieve pride, and some of them are more effective than others. Some researchers have looked at authentic versus hubristic pride. Authentic pride is basically a sense of accomplishment. It's you've done something good, you've worked hard, and good things have happened, so you're proud of yourself. Hubristic pride is being proud of something that you didn't necessarily choose, such as your ethnicity or nationality. And this has not been shown to have positive effects. So I think it's very telling that the studies done on unconditional self-acceptance have very different results than the studies that are done on unconditional pride. I think that definitely shows that they are very distinct things, and you can be very motivated to achieve pride while still having unconditional self-acceptance. There's also a tendency for people low in depression to have low motivation, so the fact that self-compassion may increase happiness and decrease depression may be part of the reason that self-compassion increases motivation. But people also don't fully understand where motivation comes from. For example, people can explain thoroughly their motivations for making decisions that they didn't actually themselves make. When people are manipulated into making a certain choice, they will still defend that choice as if they made it. And the research behind this is actually really fascinating, and I'll definitely post links to a video explaining more about that. But overall, the fact that our motivation doesn't always come from where we think it does implies that when you see something like self-compassion that doesn't seem like it would increase your motivation, you should still be skeptical about yourself because you don't know where that motivation comes from. But that's definitely a topic for another video. But if you're interested in learning more about self-compassion or similar things, I would definitely recommend reading Kristin Neff's research, or at least watching her TED Talk. It's a really fascinating topic, and it's something that I'm really interested in researching. I'll definitely post links to more resources in the description, and definitely check out more videos if you're interested. Also feel free to like, subscribe, support me on Patreon, or whatever you want. Overall, I hope you learned something from the video, and I really hope you try to be more self-compassionate in the future.